She laughed. Right there, in front of the judge, the victims' families, and a courtroom frozen in disbelief. That laugh, sharp and careless, echoed off the marble walls like a confession she didn't realize she'd made. But moments later, when the judge leaned forward and said, "You find this funny?" And everything changed. Before we begin, if you love stories where arrogance meets justice, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. You'll never miss the moment karma walks into the courtroom. Now let's step into that moment. The moment laughter turned into silence. Her name was Amber Lewis, 29 years old, convicted of manslaughter after a reckless night of speeding that left 2 lives gone forever. Yet as she stood there, orange jumpsuit crisp, chin high, her smirk never faded. The prosecution read out the charges, every detail of the victims. Final seconds, but Amber barely blinked. To her, it was just noise. Then came the victim's mother, trembling as she spoke about the children who would never come home again. The courtroom wept, everyone except Amber. The judge's gaze hardened, shifting from sorrow to disbelief. When it was her turn to speak, Amber's tone was dripping with sarcasm. "I didn't mean to, okay? I was young, I was stupid. What more do you want from me?" The room went still. The judge removed his glasses, took a deep breath, and said quietly, "You still think this is about you?" It was the first crack in her armor. The jury exchanged uneasy looks. The tension was so thick, even Amber seemed to feel it. But instead of remorse, she shrugged. "I've already been in here for months. Isn't that punishment enough?" The judge's hand trembled, not with anger, but with restraint. "Ms. Lewis," he said, voice low and deliberate, "you just taught this courtroom the difference between regret and arrogance, and that lesson will cost you dearly." What he said next would turn the smirk on her face into something the cameras would never forget. Amber froze as the words echoed across the courtroom. "That laugh just cost you 50 more years." The judge's voice was calm but heavy, slicing through the air like a verdict carved in stone. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Even the bailiff turned his head, unsure if he'd heard correctly. Amber's smirk faltered for the first time. She tried to speak. "Wait, you can't—" But the judge raised his hand. "Sit down, Ms. Lewis. You've had your say." Silence fell. The prosecutor looked stunned. The victim's mother wept quietly, clutching her necklace. The judge continued, his tone deliberate. "You showed no remorse, mocked this court, and treated 2 lost lives like an inconvenience. The law allows for leniency, but not for arrogance." He flipped through the case file. "The papers whispering like ghosts. You claim youth. You claim ignorance. Yet I see a pattern of reckless disregard. Therefore, your initial 25-year sentence is hereby extended to 75 years, to be served consecutively." Amber's body trembled. Her eyes darted from the judge to her lawyer, who sat motionless. 75 years? She repeated, voice cracking. "That's my entire life." The judge met her gaze. "That's how long those families will live without the ones you took from them." Every word hit like a gavel strike. Cameras clicked. The air grew heavy with the realization that the smirk which once defined her had become her undoing. As the guards approached, Amber's knees gave way. For the first time, she didn't look defiant. She looked human. But the sentence had been sealed. "Court is adjourned," the judge said, rising from the bench. The sound of the gavel marked not just the end of a trial, but the end of her laughter forever. The cold clang of the metal door echoed through the corridor as Amber stepped inside. Her new reality. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly, casting harsh shadows on the pale concrete walls. Her orange jumpsuit felt heavier now, as if it carried the weight of every choice she'd ever made. The guard didn't speak. He simply pointed to her cell. "End of the row," he said flatly. Amber walked past faces staring from behind bars, some curious, some judgmental, others eerily blank. She tried to look unfazed, but the tremor in her hands betrayed her. When the door shut behind her with a metallic thud, the silence was unbearable. For the first time since the trial began, she was alone. Truly alone. She sat on the thin mattress and buried her face in her hands. 75 years, she whispered. The words didn't sound real. She tried to convince herself the judge had gone too far, that it wasn't fair. But deep down, beneath the layers of defiance, something else stirred. A small gnawing truth. Images of that night flashed in her mind. The headlights, the screams, the shattering glass, the laughter she'd forced in court now echoed back in her memory, hollow and cruel. It was an accident, she said again, but the cell walls didn't believe her. She looked toward the small window near the ceiling, where faint moonlight spilled in. For the first time, she didn't feel angry at the world. She felt empty. Her roommate, a quiet woman named Denise, finally spoke from the corner. "First night's the hardest," she said softly. "After that, the silence becomes normal." Amber didn't reply. She couldn't. The words lodged in her throat. Hours later, when the lights dimmed for the night, Amber lay awake staring at the ceiling, haunted by the same thought looping endlessly in her head. They'll never forgive me. Somewhere deep inside, she wondered if she could ever forgive herself. But she wasn't ready to face that question yet. Not tonight. The next morning, a guard slid an envelope through the cell door. "Mail for Lewis," he muttered, walking off without another word. Amber stared at it for a long moment. The handwriting on the front was shaky, the letters uneven. She hesitated before picking it up, her fingers trembling slightly. Denise glanced over. "From family?" she asked. Amber shook her head. "No one writes to me." Slowly she tore the envelope open. Inside was a single folded page. The scent of lavender drifted faintly from it. She unfolded it and froze. The handwriting was familiar. It was from Mrs. Carver, the mother of one of the victims. Amber's throat tightened as she began to read. "I don't know if you'll ever see this," the letter began. "I told myself I wouldn't hate you, but I did. Every night I hated you. Then one day I realized hating you kept me chained to that night forever." Amber's eyes blurred as she continued. "You can't bring my son back. But if you ever find a way to mean the word sorry, I'll try to mean the word forgive." Amber dropped the letter, tears spilling before she could stop them. For months she'd hidden behind arrogance, behind excuses, but this was different. Denise watched quietly as Amber sank to the floor, clutching the paper like a lifeline. "She wrote to you," Denise said softly. "That means she believes you can change." Amber shook her head. "I don't deserve it." "Maybe not," Denise replied. "But sometimes forgiveness isn't about deserving, it's about surviving." The rest of the day passed in silence. Amber reread the letter over and over, tracing the words with her fingertips. For the first time, she didn't feel trapped by the walls. She felt trapped by herself, and that realization hurt more than any sentence the judge could give. That night, as the lights dimmed again, she whispered into the darkness, "I'm sorry." The cell didn't answer, but somehow, it felt like the first honest thing she'd said in years. Days turned into weeks, and Amber found herself following a routine that dulled the edges of her guilt. Wake up, count time, eat, work, sleep. But every night the same letter stayed under her pillow, worn and creased from endless reading. It was her only reminder that the world outside still existed, and that somewhere, forgiveness might too. One afternoon, a correctional officer called her name. "Lewis, legal visit." Amber frowned. "I don't have an appeal." The officer shrugged. "Well, someone filed one for you. Let's go." Her heart pounded as she was led down the narrow hallway. In the visiting room, a man in a gray suit waited, glasses perched low on his nose. "Ms. Lewis," he greeted, standing. "My name's Daniel Carter. I'm a public defender reviewing old cases for potential rehabilitation hearings." Amber raised an eyebrow. "Rehabilitation? You mean parole?" He shook his head. "Not yet. But if you've shown genuine change, you may qualify for an early reassessment." She almost laughed. "Change? You think reading a letter made me a saint?" Daniel's expression didn't waver. "No, but admitting you're not one, that's where it begins." His calmness disarmed her. For months, she'd been surrounded by guards, rules, and silence. Now, someone was looking at her like a person again. He slid a form across the table. "I can't promise anything," he said, "but I believe your remorse might mean something to the court. If you're ready, we can apply." Amber stared at the form. Her fingers hovered over the pen. "What if they laugh at me?" she asked. Daniel smiled faintly. "Then you'll know how the judge felt when you laughed." The words hit like a punch to the chest. She signed. That night, lying awake, she felt something new stirring, a fragile, unfamiliar hope. She wasn't sure she deserved another chance. But maybe she could earn one. The day of the hearing arrived sooner than Amber expected. The courtroom was smaller this time. No cameras, no reporters, no crowd eager for drama. Just the judge, her lawyer, and a handful of faces she'd never seen before. Yet somehow, it felt heavier than her first trial. The moment she walked in, all eyes followed her. Gone was the arrogant smirk, replaced by a quiet determination that even she barely recognized. Her lawyer, Daniel, whispered, "Remember, you're not here to defend yourself. You're here to speak your truth," she nodded, palms sweaty. The judge, different from the one before, looked up from the file. "Ms. Lewis, you've requested this hearing under the Rehabilitation Review Act. State your purpose." Amber swallowed hard. "Your Honor," she began, her voice trembling. "I came here not to ask for freedom, but for forgiveness." The room fell silent. I laughed at the wrong time. I thought punishment couldn't touch me, but I've learned that justice isn't about time served, it's about what that time teaches you. Her words cracked, under their own weight. I can't undo what I did, but I want to spend whatever years I have left helping others not make the same mistake. The judge leaned back, studying her. The prosecutor, the same man who once called her a danger to society, now sat quietly, his expression unreadable. After a long pause, the judge spoke. "Ms. Lewis, remorse is easy to claim, but hard to prove. Still, I sense something genuine here." He turned to Daniel. "Your client may apply for a transfer to a restorative justice program. It's not freedom, but it's a start." Amber's eyes widened. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me," the judge replied. "Thank the version of yourself who finally decided to stop lying." As she was escorted out, a strange calm washed over her. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was running from her past. She was walking toward it. Amber sat in the small program room, the walls covered with faded motivational posters. A notebook lay in front of her, blank and intimidating. "Every participant writes one letter," the counselor explained. "Not to ask for forgiveness, but to acknowledge harm." The words struck her like a gavel. For days she'd read and reread Mrs. Carver's letter, but writing her own felt impossible. What could she possibly say that wouldn't sound hollow? She gripped the pen, her hand shaking slightly. Then she began, "To the Carver family." Her breath caught. The page blurred as tears welled up. "I told myself it was an accident," she wrote. "But accidents don't laugh. Accidents don't mock pain. I did that, and I'm sorry." Her handwriting was uneven, the words bleeding into one another. Denise, sitting beside her, whispered, "Don't stop now. Let it out." Amber continued, "I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know that I finally understand what I took away." She paused, staring at the ink-stained page. For the first time, she wasn't writing to justify herself. She was writing to confront herself. After finishing, she folded the letter and handed it to the counselor. "Will they read it?" she asked. "Maybe," he replied, "or maybe it'll just sit in their file. But what matters is that you read it." That night, Amber lay in her bunk, the faint sound of rain tapping against the window bars. For once, the sound didn't haunt her. It felt cleansing, like the world was washing something away. She closed her eyes and whispered, "I'm trying," and for the first time, she meant it. A week later, Amber was cleaning the program room when the counselor entered holding a single envelope. "Lewis," he said gently. "This came through the mediation office." Her breath caught. The handwriting was the same, elegant but shaky. Mrs. Carver, her. Knees almost gave out as she sat down. "You don't have to read it now," the counselor offered. "No," Amber whispered. "I need to." Her hands trembled as she opened it. "Dear Amber," the letter began, "I wasn't sure if I should respond. When I first read your words, I felt anger again. But then I realized it wasn't anger. It was the pain I'd never let go." Amber's vision blurred. "You said accidents don't laugh." "That line broke me," the letter continued, "because for the first time, I knew you finally understood what that moment really meant." A tear fell onto the page, smudging the ink. "I can't promise forgiveness, not yet. But I no longer wish you harm. I hope in the years you have left, you find peace in doing good where you once caused pain." Amber covered her mouth, sobbing silently. Denise looked over, concern etched across her face. "It's from her, isn't it?" Amber nodded. "She doesn't hate me anymore." The counselor smiled faintly. That's a gift, Amber. Don't waste it. That night, Amber couldn't sleep. She sat by the small window, moonlight spilling across her hands. She thought about the mother who had every right to despise her, but chose compassion instead. For years, Amber had blamed fate, the system, everyone but herself. But now she saw it clearly. Forgiveness wasn't something you received. It was something you lived up to. She folded the letter carefully, placing it beside Mrs. Carver's first one under her pillow. 2 letters, one written in hate, one in hope. Together they told the story of both women's healing. Amber stood in front of a small group of inmates seated in folding chairs, her palms sweaty as she clutched the podium. The counselor had asked her to share her story, but she'd resisted for days. "No one wants to hear from me," she'd said. Yet now, as she looked at their faces, some defiant, some broken, she saw herself in every one of them. "I used to think I was different," she began quietly. "That I wasn't like anyone else in here. That I was smarter, tougher." A few inmates chuckled knowingly. "But arrogance doesn't make you strong. It just makes you blind." Her voice grew steadier. "I laughed in court because I was scared to feel anything else. I thought pretending not to care would protect me. It didn't. It destroyed me." The room was silent. One woman in the front row raised her hand. "So what changed?" Amber took a deep breath. "A letter," she said, "from the mother of the person I killed. She told me she didn't hate me anymore." Gasps rippled through the group. "That letter didn't erase my guilt. It forced me to face it. And when I finally did, I realized forgiveness isn't freedom, it's responsibility." A long pause followed. Then slowly, one of the younger inmates began to clap. Soon the whole room joined in, not out of pity but out of respect. After the session, a guard approached her quietly. "Didn't think I'd say this," he muttered. "But that was powerful." Amber smiled faintly. "It's not my story," she said. "It's everyone's who ever thought they couldn't change." That night, as she returned to her cell, Denise grinned. "Guess you're a preacher now." Amber laughed softly. "No," she said, lying back on her bunk. "Just someone finally telling the truth." The following week, Amber was summoned to the warden's office, a place she had never been before without handcuffs. The warden, a tall woman with a sharp but kind face, gestured for her to sit. "Ms. Lewis," she began, "I've been hearing about your sessions. The staff says you've managed to calm some of the toughest inmates here." "That's rare." Amber shifted nervously. "I just told my story," she said. The warden nodded. "Sometimes that's exactly what people need." She slid a file across the desk. "We're starting a peer mentorship program." "Rebuild. It pairs inmates who show growth with those just beginning their sentences. I'd like you to help lead it." Amber blinked. "Me? You want me to mentor others?" The warden smiled faintly. "Yes, you've earned trust here. Don't waste it." For a moment, Amber couldn't speak. Months ago, the idea would have felt laughable. Now it felt like redemption knocking quietly on her door. "I'll do it," she said finally, voice firm. "Good," the warden replied. "Your experience may do more for this prison than any counselor ever could." Over the next few weeks, Amber found herself guiding women who were just as lost as she once was, teaching them how to write apology letters, how to face the pain they'd buried. "You're not your worst moment," she told them, "but you have to earn every second after it." Late one evening, Denise smiled as she watched Amber leave the day room. "You've changed," she said. Amber looked at her friend. "No," she replied softly. "I'm finally becoming who I should have been all along." She gazed out the barred window, where sunlight bled into dusk. The prison hadn't shrunk, but somehow it felt less like a cage and more like a place where her story could finally begin again. Months later, Amber was called to the warden's office again. But this time, she wasn't in trouble. She was on camera. A small film crew stood waiting, adjusting lights and microphones. "Ms. Lewis," the warden explained, "a documentary team from the rehabilitation board is covering success stories from this program. They'd like to include you." Amber froze. "You want me some film?" The thought of being seen again after everything sent chills down her spine. "You don't have to say yes," the warden added gently. "But people out there think no one ever changes. Maybe it's time they saw otherwise." Amber took a deep breath. "All right," she said quietly. "But I'll only do it if I can tell it the way it really was." The next day, the crew followed her through the prison's dull corridors. She spoke about the night of the crash, the laughter that sealed her fate, and the letters that changed her life. "When I first got here," she said to the camera, "I thought time was my enemy, but time was the only thing patient enough to wait for me to grow up." The interviewer asked softly, "Do you think you deserve forgiveness?" Amber paused, her eyes glistening. "I think I deserve the chance to keep earning it," she replied. When the segment aired months later, letters began arriving from people across the country. Parents, teachers, even former inmates, saying her story had moved them. Some thanked her. Others warned her not to stop trying. One letter stood out. It was from Mrs. Carver. "I saw your interview," it read. "I don't cry easily anymore, but I did that day. Not because of your past, but because I finally saw your heart." Amber folded the letter slowly, her throat tightening. She realized the story wasn't about punishment anymore. It was about what came after. She smiled faintly and whispered, "Maybe this is what freedom feels like." The courtroom felt eerily familiar. The same cold marble floors, the same distant hum of whispers, but this time, Amber stood there not as the defendant who laughed, but as a woman who had changed. Her story had reached the state board, and her case was now being reviewed for potential sentence, reduction based on exceptional rehabilitation. The prosecutor, the same man who once called her unredeemable, was present again, but his tone was different now. "Your Honor," he began, "Ms. Lewis's conduct during incarceration is unprecedented. She's led counseling groups, mediated conflicts, and inspired dozens to enroll in rehabilitation. Even the families of victims have acknowledged her remorse." Amber listened, her heart pounding. Never in her wildest dreams had she imagined hearing those words about herself. When the judge asked if she had anything to add, Amber stepped forward. "Your Honor," she said, voice trembling but steady, "I don't ask for freedom to escape my past. I ask for it so I can spend the rest of my life proving I've learned from it." The judge leaned forward, studying her eyes for a long moment. The silence was so thick that even the guards didn't move. Finally he spoke. "Ms. Lewis, justice is not only punishment, it's the possibility of redemption. You've earned that possibility." He looked down at the papers before him. "Effective immediately. Your sentence is reduced to time served with supervised release. You are free to go." The words didn't register at first. Amber blinked, frozen. The gavel struck once, echoing like thunder. Then the tears came, quiet, uncontrollable, unstoppable. As the guards removed her cuffs, she whispered, "Thank you," the judge nodded solemnly. "Don't waste it." Amber turned, walking toward the exit. The same doors that once led her to chains now leading her to light. When she stepped outside, the air hit her face, cool and alive. She looked up at the sky and smiled, not because she was free, but because she was finally worthy of it. The first night outside felt unreal. The air tasted different, fresh, unpredictable, alive. Amber stood outside the halfway house assigned for her supervised release, clutching a small duffel bag filled with donated clothes. The city lights flickered in the distance, a world she'd only seen through barred windows for years. "Welcome back to reality," said Maya, the program coordinator, handing her a set of keys. "You'll share the space with 3 others. Curfew at 9. You'll start your community work next week." Amber nodded silently. Every sound, a car horn, laughter from across the street, felt like a reminder of everything she'd missed. That night she lay on a real bed. No steel frame, no echoing footsteps in the hall. But sleep didn't come easily. Freedom, she realized, had its own kind of walls. The next morning, she visited a small cafe recommended by Maya. The waitress smiled. "You're new around here?" Amber hesitated. "You could say that." As she waited for her coffee, she caught her reflection in the window. No jumpsuit, no number tag, just her. For a long moment, she stared, almost not recognizing the woman looking back. Later that week, she began volunteering at a youth center. The first day, a group of teenagers laughed when she introduced herself. "You were in prison?" one of them said, half mocking. "Why should we listen to you?" Amber didn't get angry. She just smiled faintly. "Because I used to laugh like you," she said. The room went silent. By the end of her first session, one of the kids stayed behind. "Did it really change you?" he asked. Amber nodded. "It didn't change me. It showed me who I really was. That night, walking back to the halfway house, she passed a newspaper stand. Her face was on the cover again, this time with a headline that read, "From Inmate to Mentor, the Woman Who Redefined Justice." Amber didn't stop to read it. She didn't need to. The real story wasn't in the paper. It was in the quiet strength she carried now, one honest day at a time. A month later, Amber received a call she never expected. "Ms. Lewis, this is Karen Holt from Channel 9 News. We'd like to invite you to speak on our live program, Voices of Redemption. Your story has inspired thousands." Amber froze. The word live echoed in her head. Cameras, lights, the same world that once branded her as a monster now wanted to hear her speak. I don't know," she stammered. "I'm not sure I'm ready." Karen's voice softened. "You're ready, Amber. You already proved it." 2 weeks later, she stood backstage. Microphone clipped to her collar, palms trembling. Maya placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You're not that girl from the courtroom anymore," she said. "You're the woman who made it out." When the stage lights turned on, Amber took a deep breath and stepped into them. The host greeted her warmly. "Amber Lewis, your story has touched the nation. What would you say to people who still doubt your change?" The audience leaned in. Amber smiled faintly. "I don't blame them," she began. "Once upon a time, I wouldn't have believed it either." The room was silent. "When I laughed in court, I thought I was invincible. But the truth has a way of catching up to you, whether in a cell or in your own reflection. I lost everything before I realized how much one moment can cost." The host nodded. "And what do you think justice means now?" Amber looked into the camera, her eyes steady. "Justice isn't about revenge or even forgiveness. It's about what we do after the damage is done. It's choosing to build something good out of what was broken." The audience erupted in applause. As the show ended, Karen whispered, "That was beautiful." Amber smiled. "No," she said softly, "that was honest." When she walked outside, a small crowd waited. One woman approached her, a stranger with tears in her eyes. "My son died in a crash," she said. "You helped me forgive." Amber's throat tightened. "Then maybe we both found what we were looking for." She looked up at the night sky, bright with city light, and whispered to herself, "Maybe this is what redemption sounds like." Amber stood once again before the same courthouse doors that had once sealed her fate. The air outside felt lighter now, the chaos of downtown fading beneath the low hum of passing cars. She took a deep breath, clutching a single white lily in her hand. Inside, the courtroom was empty, silent except for the soft echo of her footsteps. No cameras, no jury, no judgment, just memory. She approached the defendant's bench, running her fingers across the worn wooden surface where she had once stood laughing, ignorant of the lives she'd destroyed. "You don't deserve to forget," she whispered to herself. She placed the flower gently on the bench. "But you can remember differently." Judge Price entered quietly, older now but still commanding. "Ms. Lewis," she said with a faint smile, "I didn't expect to see you here." Amber turned, her voice calm. "I wanted to thank this place. It broke me, but it also built me." The judge nodded. "Justice rarely feels kind, but it should always mean something." "It does now," Amber said softly. "It means accountability. It means change." They shared a quiet moment before the judge gestured toward the door. "Go live your life, Ms. Lewis. Don't keep visiting ghosts." Amber smiled, just saying goodbye. As she stepped outside, the afternoon sun warmed her face. In her pocket were 2 old letters, Mrs. Carver's words still folded neatly. Worn but intact, she took them out, reading the line that had once shattered her. "I don't wish you harm anymore." Now it brought peace. Amber walked down the courthouse steps slowly. Every stride deliberate, every breath full of purpose. The sound of her shoes against the stone echoed behind her, but for once it didn't sound like chains. It sounded like freedom. She glanced up at the sky and whispered, "For them, for me, for everyone who thought it was too late." And as she disappeared into the crowd, it was clear that her story wasn't about punishment or even forgiveness anymore. It was about transformation, the kind that starts in darkness and ends in light.